Today, I'm delighted to welcome Tobias Bartholomé, the Head of Strategic Workforce Planning at Lufthansa Group, to the Digital HR Leaders podcast. Tobias, welcome to the show. Can you maybe start by sharing with our audience your role at Lufthansa Group, but also the journey that led you to lead strategic workforce planning for the company?
Yeah, sure, David. Thanks a lot, by the way, for the invitation. Great fan of yours. So
Oh, that's kind.
pleased and honors to be in touch with the people analytics rockstar here. So yeah, I'm for a year now heading a project on Lufthansa Group level where we reestablish strategic workforce planning on a Lufthansa Group level. Lufthansa, as the airline industry, is a very volatile industry. So we've been there before with strategic workforce planning. I was there like 10 years ago when we started that at Lufthansa Cargo and Lufthansa Technik. Then my career led me some different paths. So I'm people enthusiast. I think I've done pretty much everything in HR, except from tariff negotiations. I've been recruiting, HR development, change and transformation management, been head of HR here in corporate, and now since a year on that journey to really get the strategic view on people back to Lufthansa on a group level. Lufthansa Group is a large company, very different subsidiaries and very, very different job groups. So there is surely no one size fits all. But the poster case for strategic workforce planning we have for our technical functions, airline technicians, airline mechanics, which have lead times to after they are done with their apprenticeship, lead times of up to 10 years until they're fully qualified to handle all airplanes of the fleet. So, but the challenge here is, right, very, very different job groups and very, very different labor market positions. So we are now kind of reconsidering strategic workforce planning on a group level and try to do something like customer-centric or business-centric strategic workforce planning, where not one size fits all. Because at least my aim is not to get it out of the theoretical arena into business, which is depends a bit on stakeholders. Sometimes easier, sometimes not so easy to do.
Of course. And we'll probably cover all of those topics in our conversation, Tobias. Firstly, thank you very much for your kind words at the start. The check is in the post. And the airline industry, you're right, very volatile. I don't know if you know this, but a long time ago, I worked in the airline industry for a company called Amadeus, which you'll probably know well. Lufthansa, because Lufthansa were one of the companies that started Amadeus. So, I lived and worked in the south of France for 7 years until 2011, working at Amadeus. So I know certainly from personal experience, I know the volatility of the industry, particularly linked to the economic environment, obviously the pandemic and everything as well. So you mentioned that you've been back in kind of doing the strategic workforce planning project lead role for a year, but you also referenced that even 10 years ago you were involved with workforce planning at Lufthansa Group. Again, it'd be good to understand. You're obviously, as you said, you're trying to re-establish those efforts to take maybe a different approach, a more business-centric approach. Why have you decided to pivot and kind of not quite start again, but to re-evaluate where you are with strategic workforce planning at Lufthansa Group?
Yeah, I think what I learned from conferences is this is not just a Lufthansa specific topic, right? The topic strategic workforce planning is a bit volatile in itself, right? Starting like at my personal start was like 10 years ago, where all the demographic shift was, of course, foreseeable. But the platform wasn't really burning, right? And so we kind of started that off at Lufthansa Cargo. Lufthansa Technik did so too, but it's not too easy to get to the measure level, and it is just in some functions it's very well established over time, where there's absolutely no way around it. Like as I said, for technical functions. But for other functions, it kind of lost the urgency to it, right? It was an analytic, um, but as the labor market was still good, there was, I think the operational is always in a company a bit favored over the strategic. So on a group level, we kind of lost focus on that topic a bit, and then been hit hardly by Corona crisis. Um, and now after that, right, where all the demographic shifts that we anticipated in the beginning of the 20s are now really kicking in. People leaving age-wise, and also labor markets getting scarcer and scarcer. Now there's just another momentum for a restart, and yeah, the idea to really tailor it to the business. And not to, we are, as I said, we're on a journey and we're quite on the beginning of but we try to develop formats that enable strategic workforce planning from workshop formats, which are maybe 2 hours, 4 hours, and lead to first measures or a day. On the other hand, we have the full for the volume functions and technical. We have the full-fledged numeric strategic workforce planning in place. And what we are trying is to really get the organization is always operationally focused. So we're trying to establish strategic workforce planning on two speeds, so to say, right? And in kind of maybe platforms haven't been burning enough 10 years ago, right? It was more a good thing to do, but the need for that was still too far in the future, maybe.
Yeah, possibly. And you said there's, I suppose you've always got to balance the operational, the here and now with the strategic. But I mean, you referenced that, from airline in the airline technical and
Hmm.
mechanic roles. So it's a
Yeah,
10-year journey. So it's important that you are able to, attract, develop, retain these people, and understand obviously what happens if people leave or if demand goes up and
yeah,
you need more people. It's yeah, it's a real challenge, isn't it? So to Tobias, what does, I know you're a year into the journey and appreciate that, it's not all complete yet. Of course, it's not.
no,
Um,
no, by far not. Yeah,
so what does the new approach to strategic workforce planning consist of? What are you doing differently from maybe what you did before?
yeah. I think it's more, as I said, it's considering the here and now as well as the strategic aspects, right? Most of function on the one hand side, we are in a very good position. We are having a strong brand, still attracting people, still performing better than competitors on that. Still, we want to grow and we're on a growth path. So and that is there. People markets out there are still a restriction. So what we got on board is some labor market analytics, um, which really does the trick
Yeah,
of getting you in the conversation with senior leaderships. Right? Um, nobody likes to see that a competitor is performing better on recruiting, and this. We're having some partners there, and the labor market data are sometimes an eye opener and say, okay, this can really help us now if we're seeing, I don't know, our competitor is searching for that skill. Do we have that on our agenda or don't we? So we brought in labor market data. We're also bringing in skills data and trying to bring that to the organization through formats that are relatively easy to digest. So one thing we're doing, for example, skills
yeah,
based is a future job profiling format, right? Where we take out of different sources. We're collaborating with HR Forecast here a lot. Um, take all the skills for a certain function that are currently searched for. We have all the skills trends, which skills are evolving. We even have something like skills worth in there. So you could even measure like your learning and development efforts, right? If we skill for that skill, the market value of employees is rising. So we are much more flexible with regard to the method, because I think it's depends on, or you get the attention you need if you tailor to the question that the business is having. And on the fly, we're then also introducing the long term view. And I think the combination of those aspects does the trick of getting attention, getting HR to the table, which isn't also that easy, right? The HR function has come a long way, and is not always on business eye level everywhere. But we had for example, had a case where we came up with a competitor nobody was aware of when recruiting for allied mechanics, for example, which we are very good at. We found that an agency that is just recruiting for all NATO air forces was one of our main competitors, but they didn't. They worked in a slightly different arena, so that really did a trick. I said, okay, hi, they are really fast. What other benefits? How can we benchmark against them? And to combine that with then the long-term view, right? I think that is something that when I think of customer-oriented or customer-centric workforce planning, it's finding really the pressing issues in a certain function and catering to that in the long term, but also having some answers on the short term.
Yeah. And actually, you kind of, the next question is really around engaging senior business leaders. And I think you talked a little bit to it there by listening and understanding the questions that they've got. And if you can provide answers to their questions with insights, maybe give them something new as that example you gave there, then you capture their attention, of course. But also, maybe talk a little bit more to that in terms of how you engaged senior business, or how you are engaging senior business leaders at Lufthansa Group in the process, and what are some of the strategies that are proving to be the most effective in aligning workforce planning with their priorities?
Mm. Um, on the one hand side, we were lucky to have a kickoff with all the HR directors from the major Lufthansa Group companies. So where our topic is anchored in Lufthansa Group strategy under the header Sustainable Employability. So we have an entry gate through strategy. At the beginning, we had a workshop with all CHOs of the major group companies. So that gave us a real good angle. So that was, it's nothing that I achieve, but it's really helpful to have it in strategy and then do it as strategy implementation. So that is one angle, and also we're trying to dock to connect to strategy here very well. Another angle we had was finding the ones with the biggest problems, right? Coming from a labor market analytics side, and saying, okay, really, Munich is a really tough labor market for a lot of functions, right? So let's tackle, and we know that technicians are scarce. So let's tackle the technical unit in Munich and involve them, and show them something that they were not aware of. Another angle that we have is coming about. There's huge attention on skills disruption, right? The whole AI revolution, digital literacy piece, and we are in the same area as a learning management team. So from there, we're driving some initiatives as to enable the organization with digital literacy and basic AI skills that also gave an entrance angle to consulting qualitatively, right? Which skills will be disrupted. We also do something as simple as a newsletter to the senior organization, where we, like, for example, taking insights from your company and from the market, right, and having it digestible to leaders, and say, okay, what are the major trends and what do they mean for us? So trying to establish as a center of knowledge and competent partner to accompany our business into the future. Nobody knows the future, but you can have a very good look into trends, right? And programs is also an interesting one, right? We have some Lufthansa Group wide programs heading, I don't know, for a major IT innovation. I don't know, in finance, for example. We hop on that program trains, right? Finance function is going to be evolved, transformed. New IT is joining. So what are they doing? They are thinking about how the finance profiles evolve. What is the finance skill that my employees have to know next to be competitive? What we also get something like first automation insights in our data. So if we look at a function, we can say, okay, which skills are evolving, which are trending, and where do we see some duties that have potential for automation? So that really coming from market information and market data, and then cater to the specific needs and have developed a bit of an instinct. What might saying is, right, the bait has to appeal to the fish. What is the right bait for the specific fish you're talking to? And I think we are building that offer step by step, right?
No, I think there's some good lessons there for people listening. Number one, it's called strategic workforce planning, so please link it to strategy. There's so many things that you can do, but find the leaders that have maybe got the biggest problems to solve and focus on those. Like, as you said there, related to Munich, for example, the challenges, the competitive nature of hiring and retaining key skills there. That link with learning, because that's one way to close the gap, of course, that you might find. And then a very canny ploy as well. Help finance, because if you can help finance, they'll likely help you as you move forward as well. And obviously, they had looking at the transformation of the finance function, as you said. What is likely to be automated? What are the new skills required? How can you help the individuals and the leaders within finance understand that and put that towards their plan? So I think some really good practical sort of learnings there, I think, for listeners. You've talked about this a little bit, but maybe we can talk a little bit more now. How do you navigate, and again, I appreciate you're a year into the journey, how do you navigate the tension between maybe some leaders focus on the immediate priorities and challenges that they've got to solve now, and the longer term strategic needs of workforce planning? And we've talked a little bit about how you're kind of doing both in parallel with each other. I don't know if you could talk a little bit more to that. Maybe if there's an example or something you can give as well.
Trying to establish the burning platform now as a door opener. And if we do so, and really that talk about measures, right? This is then either about recruiting strategies, competitor analysis. How do we really set up our talent attraction in that specific function to stand out against the competition? And then that's, for example, in the for technical functions in Munich. We're doing that, and then in like alongside the same thing, we're establishing and bringing further the quantitative long term planning. It's like gaining. Nobody's willing to talk about tomorrow's burning platform when the platform is burning already. So I think gaining trust by showing that there are really some actionable insights that we can use now, and then using that trust in order to now let's see if we would have done that 5 years before, we could have the platform wouldn't have been burning by now, right? So let's have a look into the nearer future. Um, that's I think that's overall the strategy to be handy, to be really approachable to the problems ahead. And I think people don't listen to you. If they have, because most of them are facing some issues. If you listen closely and have something to offer, and we manage to have something to offer in some cases, you just gain that trust to also take the long-term view. That's one thing, but also showing benefits of the long-term view, right? We've been in a very tough crisis, and really been on the edge of insolvency, and to still have a plan for this kind of situation that says, okay, just imagine we survived this. What is how do we, if we survive, how will we ramp up? And if we look at in downsizing, even though this is the top priority, even to get refinanced from the financial market, to have ramp up strategies in place already. That was something kind of a learning from the crisis. I say, okay, of course we did a targeted downsizing approach, but did we have labor market shortages in ramp up at specific locations in mind? Not as much as we might be possible today to say, okay, we have something on offer when it comes to managing volatility, because it's that common maybe it's because the thing is called strategic workforce planning that everybody expects a plan. I think the thing is just the wrong last name, right? It's about scenarios, it's about sensitivities, and it's not about a plan, but about different plans that show a bandwidth and that enable decision making. So just having a look at the long term offers you a lot of even in a demographic situation, where demographic information now gets more and more viable for the process. We in the beginning of the 2030s, we will be having a lot of employees leaving, right, the last ones of the baby boomer generation retiring. And when we're talking about efficiency measures in the short term, to have that, okay, look what happens if we look 3 years ahead. We will have levers anyway. So we might have a staffing problem in 6 years if we go for efficiencies in 3 years. So show the benefit of the long term view, but also get like the entrance ticket with showcasing what you can do by now. Another interesting aspect we're into, but we're just at the beginning of it. It's location analysis, right? It's I think it's the same in most European workforces that we're having skilled workers shortages, and we are really have to broaden the picture, where to hire, maybe bring work to the employees and not bring the employees to work. So there's a lot of research, a lot of interest, but and a lot of business need to figure out, okay, which is our setup in the future in order to acquire talent. Where do we have talent supply that is enough? Where do we have relatively low competition? And that's also a nice angle we're just beginning to play, right? Where are we doing business? How are we maybe using the fact that we are an airline, which is multi-hub in Europe, so we can hire in different places, so we have a good outreach. That's just in the beginning, but really to get yourself into those discussions and saying, okay, we're having location data that can inform you about talent supply, and we can guide you in this decision. So proof of concept still to be done, right? Since we're in the beginning there, but I can say the information is very well received and opens up some doors, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, again, some good lessons I think for people listening here. I remember doing a podcast episode. I think it was 2021 with the then head of people analytics at Capital One,
Mm.
Guru Sethupathi. He's not there now. He's running a company called Fair now, and he was talking about the 3 or 4 year journey he'd had leading people analytics at Capital One, and he said phase one, he would say
Mhm.
to his team,
Mhm.
"Be useful, find the problems, solve the problems, build the trust,
Yeah, yeah,
build the reliance." And that's what you've just talking to there. You're not going to get the permission to play with the
yeah.
strategic future looking stuff if you don't help the business solve the problems that they've got now. So I think that's a really, really good piece of advice there, I think, for those listening that, maybe working in workforce planning themselves. Um, you struck on something really important, which I think is going to hit all countries in Europe, probably already is hitting countries in Europe. But based on the BCG data I saw a few years ago, it's
Mhm.
going to really hit
Yeah,
Germany, which is the size of
yeah.
the working population is shrinking, and as you said, by 2030 it's going to,
Mhm.
I think it was double
Mhm.
digits, it was a percentage point that the smaller workforce. We're not going to talk about it here because this is a podcast about HR topics and business topics, but it does put into context the whole migration arguments that are going on across Europe and become a very politically charged, obviously, debate at the moment.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Where
Mm.
because this really is becoming more and more a business factor, right? I like the saying, work is not a place anymore. So that has changed the competition for work
It has,
workers, right? Um, so we need to be attractive in
exactly.
Germany and in Europe, and even also interesting view if you look at an airline, whom are we competing against, or what are the products we are in competition with? Of course, competing with American airlines. We're of course competing with Asian, Middle East
Yeah,
airlines, right? So the competitors are in very, very different places and very different situations. So it is also the question of getting the location Europe. Attractive to work here and to cater to a global airline operation. And we are in competition then to different locations who maybe have some tailwinds from the governments over there, and
maybe.
we need to make it work under our circumstances, which is still working quite well, but this for sure is a challenge. Yeah? Competition is on. Yeah.
And I think the other thing you mentioned there was the location analysis. And again, I know, appreciate you're in a proof of concept phase around that at the moment, because maybe that is an advantage that a big airline like Lufthansa's got. You've got multiple hubs, um, and what you can help
Yeah.
executives make decisions around is
Yeah.
what hubs to invest in moving forward, based, and
Yeah.
clearly talent is one of those factors, and the availability of talent, the relative competition for that talent as well is, and as you said, it's scenarios. If X happens, here's a scenario that will help us
Yeah.
deliver X. But what if Y happens? What if Z happens? As you said, you need to have different scenarios in place for depending on how things might happen, and particularly in the airline industry, which, as we talked about, is particularly
Yeah.
volatile and is impacted by economic situations.
Yeah, and that is a bit right. It's so counterintuitive, right? So if people ask you,
Mm.
did you predict Corona crisis? Of course not. But a crisis and
How can
a
you?
pandemic. Now we know about the the level a crisis can reach for us, which this was for sure the biggest one we ever tackled. But that's not the point, right? It's not about predicting that specific crisis and say how are we going to tackle that, but having that in the portfolio to be flexible with your workforce and to have information when making decisions in the crisis, ready to have decisions done in the most informed way possible. But yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive that specifically if it's volatile, you need a strategic view on your workforce in order to figure out
Yeah.
your options. Yeah, and the multi-hub, multi-location thing, we're already utilizing that, right? When we say, I don't know, in Zurich is quite a good market for some sales analyst jobs, some pricing jobs, then that's something that we can relatively flexible react to, since we are having, at least in the business processes, we're having a matrix organization over all the Lufthansa Group airlines. So that gives us flexibility also to
Mm.
say we hire where we get the best talent, which is but this is not always the case. It doesn't apply to all functions, but we do so at least in our metrics processes, and that's a real asset. And yeah, the asset is starting to play out. Right, before that, it wasn't necessary. Now it is. I also like taking a systems view. I'm not hoping not to get too airline specific. This is a very complex system you're operating in. You're depending on a lot of functions, a lot of, you're depending on infrastructure, you're depending on your technical assets, right? So we are really hit by supply chain issues we're having with, I don't know, the big vendors of planes. Um, but also it's what is your hub like on a talent structure, and not only your own one but also the one of your service providers, for example, right? We haven't won anything if we are ready as a Lufthansa for a
Mm.
bigger flight operation in summer, if our local providers who, I don't know, do the traffic on the ground on airports, who do security control, if they're not ready. So this is a highly complex and easily irritatable
It is.
system. And I think that's also, not that I have answers to that, but it's also an interesting question. How can we hire to the system? How can we really establish partnerships in a system in order to be able to have a really attractive employment system at our hubs, for example? Yeah.
And Tobias, you've talked a little bit about how you do this. Maybe we can dig a little bit deeper now. We may have another example. How you're incorporating external labour market data into your planning efforts. You've given a couple of examples already.
Mhm.
You know, and how this helps Lufthansa Group remain competitive.
I think there maybe two use cases, right? The one is with talent attraction, or if we talk to versions 4R, right? The one is with recruit. The other one is with retrain or even retain. So we are using both arenas where we figure out. I don't know. We're doing comp and ben analysis of competitors. We're evaluating how our jobs described, how future oriented are we in our job description, in our job posting compared to others, and really use that to make our employers attractive to and more successful in recruiting. So we sort of sometimes do that. And after that, with some persona analysis, and so really that leads then to different hiring strategies. On the other hand, we are looking into re and upskilling and say what is also there, coming from the labor market, what are the major skill shifts, and how can we cater to that, right? We're also having a program that is driving the future of sales functions, and there we're also going to be involved and saying, okay, what is modern sales? What do we see in the market? What is searched for? What skills? What does make a modern employer? And the nice thing is that all the data when it comes to job posts are out there. You can even combine them then with, I don't know, innovation trends, and really have something to offer even to a function that is already quite informed in itself, and say, okay, look, this is what is going on site, which is going on in the labor market, right? Because yeah, if you have a strong employer brand, in the past time you were not required to care as much about that, because people were, and it's a sexy industry, right? It's about internationality, also a lot of technical enthusiasm around aviation. Um, so I think we as an organization are not so very much used to having that. Okay, how can we compete? How do we get? Okay, maybe we acquire the first 5 out of 10, but now it gets more difficult to hire the second 5 out of 10. And really to help our business leaders with market insights, who is also nice to see who is best in recruiting, right? Measured in external times to hire, and say, okay, let's have a look at this one. What can we, yeah, not copy, but what can we learn from that, understand from that, and yeah, tackle the labor market in a way that they do. So it's more right in strategic discussions in workshop formats where we had this future job profiling, for example. We then first use the knowledge of business leaders to have to have an inside out view. Okay, what kind of future do we see? What kind of trends do we see? And then we add that with the labor market thing, and that is doing the trick, and also quite eye opening. Sometimes we also arrange for we had that with our customer service function, for example, where IKEA did a nice thing in reskilling service agents into sales agents, right? Saying, okay, these are people who know our product very well, and who are in direct customer contact. How can we use, on the one hand, we have automation of customer service, and how can we use those people and their knowledge for a different skill? And we have, for example, set up and exchanged them with the IKEA team, and let's see in which direction our customer service function is evolving. But yeah, those were the examples that come to my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, really good examples. And again, it shows the power of learning and working with your peers in other companies as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Because
For sure.
you're sometimes tackling the same, well, usually tackling very similar
Yeah.
problems, albeit
Yeah,
in a
that's
different context sometimes. But
yeah, and I think formats like these, right, where you can get insight into what are your colleagues doing, and a lot of so I mean one or the other exchange around with other companies, that is really worthwhile, getting all those different perspectives and then saying, okay, how can we go for more excellence in our strategic HR management?
yeah, I've literally just got back from Paris. We had one of our Insight 222 people analytics program meetings. We had about 50 practitioners from various companies.
Mhm.
L'Oreal hosted, and it was actually interesting when people started talking about the challenges they're trying to solve for in 2025, how similar they were, but they're all coming from different industries or different contexts, but very similar. And then by talking them through together, people leave with ideas that can maybe help accelerate each of their progress. So it can be quite helpful. Talking about that, we obviously, particularly with the data that you've talked about that you bring, some of the external insights, all this stuff's great, but it's important to drive action. So really, a question here: how do you work with your leaders, your decision makers to actually take action on some of the insights that you're providing?
Yeah, we truly consider this the main part, right? If we don't get into action, it's just the statistics, right? Or it's just a newspaper article, just some information. So since we are not so far in time, we are just approaching the measure levels with our project. Trying to act as a broker to, on the one hand, all the internal capabilities that we have in setting up a program. Currently, we're working to set up a reskilling in IT, where we have where there's going to be growing demand in one area, and of course, demand is growing everywhere, but IT security functions, for example, are very hard to get in the market. And we are involved in kicking this off, involved in getting acting like a matchmaker with different internal functions, where we get then L&D of the specific company involved. Sometimes bringing some external contacts, and then the goal is to be tracking, right? And really having a measured tracker, but that we are really driven by getting to the measure level. We even our meeting structure is we have just one measure only meeting, so we're only talking about which measures are being taken in which domain. Yeah, and then it's about really tracking those, right? I think it's good that we're involved in some projects that will be tracking the measure results anyway, and have high attention. But yeah, we are also steered by review, and we'll be reporting measures and results there. But still, yeah, I think that's the thing that does the trick. Unless it's been just words, right, or figures. Um, Yeah, having a high,
Yeah.
so current approach is having a high focus, setting up an individual tracking, getting into the tracking systems of programs, and considering as part of the job to kick this off and to track this back, because we of course want to learn how successful this our impact has been.
And as to link to that, you mentioned earlier that you're providing regular communications to senior managers on some of the external insights that are out there. As part of that, are you also communicating some of the successes that you're having on some of the initiatives within the organisation to, I don't know,
Mm.
even more interest from some of the senior managers?
For sure, that is on the roadmap this year. First of all, it was about awareness, right? And then once we have really trackable actions, we are going to report that and have those success stories. Of course, we have success stories from the longer lasting SWP project, right? As I told you, for
Mm,
the technical function, they are quite well equipped and they steered far better through the crisis than a lot of other functions because they were informed to take very uncomfortable decisions, right? And when still in crisis, to decide, okay, we need to hire. If we believe that we are going to survive this, we need to hire now because we're seeing a gap in 3 to 5
yeah,
years, and then having a real good return to market and good results. Of course, those success stories are there. But yeah, we are now working with a set of different measures, right? Small ones, big ones, and have them communicatable uh, is for sure a good thing to do, and we're planning on doing that. Yeah. But also, yeah, sometimes it's I like that one. Be useful, right? Be useful in and be easy to deal with. For example,
yeah,
we tried a format just in a half-hour interview with one of our top executives, and said, "Are you informed about your workforce? We have some informations, and we have just an interview format just highlighting like the four risk classes. So what are your most important functions? What are the labor market risks? What are the competency risks? What are capacities that are at risk? And how's your demography?" And then in a very easy interview format with just two visualizations where we had that 4 dimensions lined out, and then we had another one when we come to measure, say, okay, in which of these functions do we have overall armor supply, and how about skills disruption in this function? So just a 4 quadrant scheme. And then we could relatively easy set up, okay, we see reskilling potential. And that was in an
yeah.
8:30 to 9 early morning coffee. Um, of course, the working out of that thing really then takes longer, and we're still on it. But yeah, I like to refer to it as maybe the fastest SWP analysis done. I think it's
Mm.
that's also important, right? To fit in business schedule um, and come to first insights and first measure ideas relatively fast.
So, Tobias, a couple of questions left. Obviously, we've talked about this a little bit, but the airline industry is part of a broader travel and mobility ecosystem. Um, how does Lufthansa collaborate with maybe some external partners that you may have to address any shared talent challenges, such as if there are shortage in specific roles or regions that where there may be an ability to partner together?
Yeah. Um, this is really, as that was the we briefly talked about it. It's things are happening in ecosystems. Um, we are really at the beginning of that, right? When we are, so for example, at our hubs, our operational leaders are in very close alignment with the service providers on the ground. And so they really exchange about hiring needs, have a look not to cannibalize each other's needs. So,
Mm,
and really having the view that we want to have a performant ecosystem. Still, there are a lot of ideas to further go into that, right? To to establish partnerships. We have that, for example, in Munich. We have a partnership with the airport Munich for one terminal. So we have a terminal that we are jointly operating. That is an infrastructure partnership, and maybe that partnership goes even farther when it comes to job functions, right? Um, but this is in the beginning and in the idea stage, right? What if we are so dependent on each other in this ecosystem? Why not share some benefits that one or the other have, right? If people from ground service providers would have access to Lufthansa labor market after some time, for example, maybe we have some benefits that would be attractive to others. Still, just non-citable ideas, right? But
Yeah,
it makes definitely sense to look on these ecosystems together with our service partners, and yeah, maybe even other airlines, right? And another thing that is comes into play there is increasing volatility of air traffic, right? Because after Corona, we've seen some structural shifts. Business traffic hasn't come back as strong as it was before Corona, right? Maybe some years ago, we were sitting in the same room recording a podcast, which we aren't now. Um, and leisure travel has, on the other hand, increased. So it's also a tricky task now, on the one hand, to have our labor and the division of our labor across the month of a year really adapted to that seasonality, but
of course.
also to look for complementary industries that are having maybe an inverse volatility where we can work, right? We Student programs are something, right? Brussels Airlines is, for example, having students just flying over their summer holidays, and after that studying. So it's a very limited period that they work, and then they study, and after that they can work again. So really finding, and that which works quite well with the schedule of the students, of finding partners, finding systems that are complementary to us is, I think, a task that is where we're still beginning. Um, but yeah, right. If you want to be a leading airline group, you have to be also leading in collaboration with your partners because you're always operating in under specific circumstances, and you cannot just stop at we just fly the planes. And I think there will be more strategic development into that direction.
Two questions. So, first one. So, again, most of the people listening to this are, in fact, probably all of the people listening to this are working in HR or servicing HR professionals as technology firms or consultants. If you were to give one piece of advice to the HR leaders that are listening on how they can build or improve their strategic workforce planning capabilities, what would it be?
I think it would be the be useful thing, right? Really be useful, be tricky in a way to get your foot in the door, to get your seat at the table, figure out what is the biggest business problem that your leaders are having, and be useful in that, and be perceived as a partner consulting in that. I think that will do the trick then for a long-term partnership. And yeah, I think there's been a lot of talk
Yeah.
about the rise of HR, just from a labor market perspective, and it depends a bit on the industry, but most industries are people industries, and people being scarce. the role of HR is, of course, there's a good momentum to increase the role and the impact of HR, but we have to maybe let go of some old ways, right, and be solution consultants, right, on the people aspects of business problems. I think that will do the trick.
Yeah, well, that's a good piece of advice. Find a big problem, solve it, and then, as you said, be useful.
Sounds so easy, right? I think you don't even have to solve it, but contribute to the solution. And I think HR may have more to contribute than.
It does. It's not, of course.
Yeah, basically, right? All business people doing the same. We are buying planes with, I don't know, 10 years ahead, more than 10 years ahead. So that is, of course, a scenario view that we are taking there when buying that. Does anybody know how the
Mm.
future look like? No, no. But we have some hints as to educated guesses, right? And we have some factors that we know about. I don't know how this workforce is developing. So let's do the same thing that in any other business function is already part of the game, right? Think in scenarios and uh, propose measures to fulfill those.
Well, we're at the last question, Tobias, and this is a question that we are asking everyone in this series. And I think you've talked about this in without mentioning the word in a number of the questions that you've got. So maybe you might summarize from here. So the question is, how do you leverage people analytics to inform strategic workforce planning initiatives?
Um, a lot, I think, right? People analytics, broad term. Um, we are bringing a lot of analytics on the people who are not already in the company to strategic workforce planning when it comes to talent supply on specific sites, skilled supply, location analytics. So there's a lot done there. Internal people analytics, of course, when we do strategic workforce planning, we have an assessment on the internal workforce on main dimensions. We're bringing that too. We also have a dashboard project where we link internal and external data, where you can see, okay, in my function, in my roles that I have, which kind of skills disruption has there been throughout? What are skills disruption trends, and what are labor market demand trends, so that me as a business leader, I'm informed not only about my workforce age, skills, and so forth, but also can relate that to the labor market and say, okay, I'm hosting functions that are in high demand on the labor market, and that hasn't been the case like 2 years ago. So we're trying to link the two, and since a lot of talk is about so it's and the purpose is on the one hand side to use it for recruiting, but also for further development and reskilling. Yeah, and we are really trying to complement that. In parallel, we're building skills management, for example, internal skills management on the way there. So in some time we'll be able to complement strategic workforce planning with internal skills development, having it linked to learning offers, right, where you can, for example, compare yourself to the skill in the market, and then see, okay, what the learning offers can get me there. So there are a lot of use cases to link people analytics data to strategic workforce management.
It's a good way to end it. I think. I think it sounds that data and analytics is underpinning everything that you're doing, from the insights, whether that's on the supply side or on the demand side, and then for the actions as well. So really interesting to us. Well,
me too.
Really enjoyed our conversation today. I think, in a year you're doing some impressive stuff, I think, at the Lufthansa Group in quite a challenging environment and industry as well. How can listeners stay in touch with you, presumably on LinkedIn, and maybe find out more about your work?
Yeah. Just find me there, follow me there. I'm getting a lot of requests, so not the fastest answerer of direct messages on LinkedIn, but yeah, we can definitely be in touch there.
That's great. Well, Tobias, thank you very much for sharing your story with listeners of the Digital HR Leaders podcast, and I look forward to maybe seeing you in person at a conference or event at some point this year.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.